Rachael Rollins has resigned as U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts after federal investigators released 2 scathing reports detailing a slew of ethical failures over her year and a half in office. Most notably, after 2 separate investigations, the Justice Department Inspector General and the Office of Special Counsel found that Rollins tried to influence the election to replace her as Suffolk County DA. She fed the press damaging details about one candidate, then acting DA Kevin Hayden, including sensitive DOJ info. She acted as a political advisor to the other candidate, Boston City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, and she lied under oath about what she'd done. Investigators also cited several other transgressions, including inappropriate attendance at political events, soliciting free Celtics tickets, and getting outside parties to cover personal travel costs. The special counsel called some of the now former U.S. attorney's actions, quote, among the most egregious transgressions of the Hatch Act they'd ever investigated. That act bars federal employees from engaging in political activities, partisan political activities, while on the job. Rollins' resignation seems to rule out any additional penalties from the government as discipline for her Hatch Act violations, but the political consequences are just beginning to come into focus. Joining me to talk it through are GBH News senior investigative reporter Phillip Martin and Abdallah Fayyad, opinion writer and editorial board member at the Boston Globe. Before I start, we should note that GBH News legal analyst Daniel Medwed was referenced in the Department of Justice report on Rollins. Medwed has been suspended as an analyst pending further review. Thank you both for being here. Phillip, as someone who's covered Rachael Rollins for years, what was your reaction when you read through these 2 reports when they popped?
Well, it was surprise. I think, like a lot of people, I was shocked. And here's the reason why. I think there were expectations because of the leaked information earlier regarding her attendance at a fundraiser for Jill Biden last summer. And that was a clear violation of the Hatch Act. We had understood that she had gone inside as opposed to greeting Jill Biden outside, which would have not led perhaps to a violation.
Yeah.
The fact that she went inside, the fact that she took part in a fundraiser, that was seen as problematic. So I expected some type of reprimand. I did not expect this wide-ranging report about Kevin Hayden and the role that she played in trying to secure his election.
Yeah, and I got to say, when I was surprised as well. And the detail, in particular in the Department of Justice report, it was so intense, the texture, it was so rich and so damning that was part of my surprise.
Well, that's true, and I should say to subvert his election, my apologies, not to secure his election.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Regarding Kevin Hayden and her working on behalf, as the report said, essentially working as a campaign manager for Phillip.
Thanks for catching that, because I should have.
For Ricardo Arroyo.
I didn't. Abdallah, in the editorial that the Globe put out about moving forward in the wake of these reports, you suggested that Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey should basically steer clear of the process, trying to come up with Rollins' successor. They had recommended her, and the Globe editorial page says, they should keep their distance this time around. Why is that?
Part of the reason is because, both reports outlined an extraordinary abuse of power that was overtly political. Rachael Rollins had used the office of the U.S. Attorney to influence a political election. The DOJ has to act as an apolitical department, one that pursues justice without fear or favor. We cannot have a Department of Justice that acts political in any way. And so in order to clean up that office after what happened under Rachael Rollins in these reports, the Department of Justice and President Biden in particular has to make sure that her successor is as apolitical and fair as possible. Is not somebody who is coming up through the political ranks, but somebody who is respected, somebody who is apolitical, somebody who is as independent as possible. That's the kind of reasoning behind that.
Is there implicit in that recommendation a suggestion that Markey and Warren missed cues about Rollins when they pushed for her nomination in the first place that they should have caught?
That's a good question, and I think they have to answer that question at some point in a real way. It's hard to say at this point what their lapse of judgment here was, because the reality is Rachael Rollins was a qualified candidate to be U.S. Attorney. She was the district attorney. She had a good record as district attorney as far as we can tell. And the reality is, as Senator Markey said, she was vetted by the White House. The FBI does a background investigation on candidates for U.S. Attorney, as does the DOJ. And, if they didn't turn anything up then, her qualifications, her resume made her a candidate for a U.S. attorney. So, it's hard to say that they had, serious lapses of judgment there without knowing the full story, but it's certainly a question that needs to be answered.
Phillip, what, if anything, are Rollins' most passionate supporters saying in the wake of these findings? Are you hearing support, continued support for her, people perhaps suggesting she's getting an unfair deal from the federal government or an unfair shake? Or is there frustration with Rollins, anger at her for having this opportunity, moving into this incredibly important role and then blowing it, as far as we can tell?
Well, I think it's both. I think you're hearing from, and I have spoken to a number of her supporters, interestingly, few who want to talk on the record, but you do find continued support for Rollins because they believe she is essentially principled, though they also are concerned that what she did was indeed unethical. So you have those who support Rollins because she is a principled progressive, but they certainly don't agree with the Tom Cottons of the world,
right,
who basically are attacking her progressivism,
right,
not her. But they are concerned that she blew it. I think the term that Kevin Cullen used in the Globe was hubris. And that is what you're hearing on behalf of some of her supporters. But you do continue to find people who are, in fact, who find that she is essentially a principled individual who took it too far in trying to basically hold on to her legacy with the district attorney's office, feeling that Kevin Hayden, they felt, might have jettisoned some of those reforms that had been instituted.
I know that whatever, we all have different opinions. We're all subjective human beings. But if you actually spend the time to read those reports, the idea that she just took it too far, as you mentioned at the outset, there are just so many richly detailed transgressions in here. It seems to defy easy dismissal to me, but that's just my take as one observer.
Well, that's just it. It can't be dismissed, and her supporters aren't saying these things should be dismissed. They find that what she did was extremely problematic.
Okay, thank you for
but they also find that this does not in any way give credence to the declarations by right-wing Republicans, such as Tom Cotton, that she was unqualified. The very point that Abdallah made is absolutely correct. There's a difference between being unqualified, and you had a vetting commission process that deemed her as a qualified candidate, but also found that she engaged in behavior that can only be described as hubris.
Abdallah, the Globe editorial points out, I think quite appropriately, that there's no necessary connection between her approach to criminal justice, her progressive approach, and her transgressions while she was U.S. attorney. But it seems to me that people are likely to form that association, rightly or wrongly. Do you think that it's going to make it harder on the heels of this, or do you think what Rollins did will make it harder in the future for people who approach criminal justice the way she did to be elected to DA positions, for example?
I really think it shouldn't, and I don't think it will. And part of the reason is because Rollins herself was a deeply flawed individual to hold this office. She was far too political, and what she did, was her own doing. There's no one else to blame but herself. What she was doing was clearly, unethical. Some of her conduct not only just bordered but crossed the threshold of criminal, lying under oath. She knows that. She's a lawyer. No one forced her to do any of this stuff. No one forced her to use the office of U.S. attorney to influence an election. She knew it was wrong. That was her doing. That does not at all reflect her legacy on criminal justice reform as a district attorney. Doesn't at all influence, the policies that she put in place. Other district attorneys or the progressive prosecutors in the country. Doesn't impact the work that they're doing. It doesn't impact criminal justice reform activists. It is just reflective of an individual who violated her code of conduct and potentially committed criminal conduct as well.
Phillip, do you agree with Abdallah's take there?
I think what's happening, though, I think the conservatives will stitch this as part of the fabric that they are sewing against progressive DAs and U.S. attorneys across the country. So I think that this is not a separate incident in the minds of right-wing Republicans. It will be used politically. It will be used as an example of what happens. In the same way that Krasner is being used in Philadelphia, Garcon is being used, the district attorney in Los Angeles, and you find a similar situation in St. Louis, where the DA, progressive DA, has been forced out. The whole notion of a progressive DA and progressive law enforcement is under assault. Rachael Rollins will become example A in as a U.S. attorney, someone who is supposed to be apolitical in that assault on progressive criminal reform legislation, justice, and district attorneys across the country.
Closing question for both of you. When Ricardo Arroyo, who was the candidate, candidate Rachael Rollins, wanted to see elected to replace her, when he was interviewed a day or two ago, he said, among other things, you know, there were leaks in this race that damaged me, and I'd like to see them investigated. Let's take a look at how he put it.
I'll say that this particular campaign suffered from a number of illegal leaks from different directions. Certainly the reports that were leaked 2 weeks before an election that have not been investigated into where those leaks came from. There's been a number of things that I would say in that particular case specifically that I'm aware of that I find considerably problematic and that I do hope are fully under investigation.
These would be leaks involving past allegations of sexual assault against him. Really quickly, does he have a point here? Now that we know one side of the story, what happened behind the scenes, should we know the full thing? And do you think we will?
Well, I think everything should be revealed.
Yeah.
There should be no secrets at this point. This should be everything involving this situation in his election should be revealed. But I can also tell you that I think he's hurt by this tremendously, no matter how this turns out.
All right, Abdallah, you got the last word.
I agree entirely. I mean, I think these two reports open up a lot of questions about the conduct of a whole host of public officials. You know, the district attorney, Kevin Hayden, also had questionable conduct during that election. And, you know, while that's not outlined in this report, you know, that's something that should be
It
investigated.
makes you want to learn more.
Yeah.
Right? All right, Abdallah, Fayyad, Phillip, Martin, thank you both.
Thank you, Adam.